Every year, the budget is presented in the month of March. Last year, we saw a change from this process where the budget was preponed by almost a month. And this year, due to the elections which were there in May 19, the budget was presented on an interim basis earlier, but now there will be a full-fledged budget. And with a clear and stable government at the center for the next 5 years, the expectation is there will be some ground-breaking changes which are going to change the course of the economy. Everyone has their own set of expectations in terms of what the government should do and what the government should not do. Something that brings about a lot of economic changes. But then, while all of these expectations cannot be met, there are some which are definitely worth looking into it. So in this short video, I'm going to cover a few of these expectations which are there more from an individual taxation perspective and at a corporate level. So first let's look at what are the expectations of the individuals. The first such expectations from an individual perspective is that there should be some more relief which should be given to the individual. We saw in the interim budget that the marginal relief was increased, but if the income is above 5 lakh, then this marginal relief is something which is not provided to the individual. That is something which one should look at, that maybe this relief could be provided to all individuals irrespective of the tax slabs that they are in. Second is the deductions relating to investments. Now the limit that is there currently covers a lot of payment which taken together definitely in case of most of the people exceed the limit of 150,000. To provide incentive to certain sectors where investment is required, what can be done by the government here is that this limit of 150,000 may be increased by maybe another 50,000 and it may be focused to those sectors where the government thinks that investment is required to give a boost to the economy. The government in the last budget had increased the proposal where instead of one, an individual can treat 2 house property as self-occupied, of course subject to certain conditions which are there. But the limit for the interest deduction on housing loan was kept at the same amount. It might be a good idea to increase that housing loan limit to maybe another 1 lakh or something, depending on whether the individual has 1 or 2 houses. This is also going to impact indirectly the real estate sector, which generates a lot of employment and could be something which can help boost the economy, which is what the government is looking at this point in time. In case of salaried employees, we know that there are a lot of deductions which are like 100 rupees, 300 rupees a month towards the education allowance for children. Now, I don't know which schools right now actually can be looked at by the parents for 100 rupees or 300 rupees a month. And definitely there needs to be an improvement in terms of looking at objectively as to what exactly is the expenditure which is incurred in the current line and accordingly make the amendments to increase those limits. I mean, there's no point giving a deduction when it is not in line with the current economic scenario. One of the other things which is there, again, which impacts the real estate sector also is that the government has provided certain incentives where if you sell a house and then you invest in another residential property, you get certain benefits under section 54 or 54F. The time limit which is provided there is 1 year before, right, or a few years after the property is sold. Now this time limit of 1 year before or 2 years after or 3 years after is something which is not in line, particularly in the cases where the investment is made in flats. As a buyer, I know that when I book a flat or when I did book a flat some 10 years ago, it never got constructed in these period of 2 or 3 years. And the reason is there is something which is beyond my control. So then I get a double whammy. One, the construction doesn't happen, I don't get the house. At the same time, the deduction which I might have claimed by investing in another residential house is something which is taken back and it impacts me double, which actually forbids me from investing into something similar in the next time around. So it may not be a bad idea to increase that time frame within which that investment has to be made in cases where you're investing in a flat maybe. On the house part, of course, if I'm constructing, I have the liberty. I can put it in 2 years or 3 years depending on whatever time frame is required. One of the other cases where I think at an individual level something can be done, particularly for the small taxpayers, is that the limit for payment of advance tax should be increased. Currently that limit stands at 10,000. It may not be a bad idea to increase the liability to pay advance tax maybe up to 25,000. Now, insofar as corporates are concerned, or maybe entities other than individuals are concerned, a few things that the government may look at is a rationalization of tax rates. We have certain categories of companies, which covers most of the companies, where the tax rate has been reduced to 25%. But there is no corresponding adjustment or no corresponding reduction in tax rate insofar as maybe an LLP or partnership or other forms of organizations are concerned. To provide competitiveness to all of them, the government should look at streamlining the tax rate for all forms of entity. The company, the logic might be that they also pay dividend distribution tax, whereas in case of partnership that may not be payable. But then when you are doing business and you are looking at reinvesting those profits back into your business, a reduction in tax rate is done something which is going to increase the amount of investment that gets plowed back. The tax holidays, etc., is something which has been taken away over a phased period of time, and I would not say that that decision was totally wrong or that was not something which India should have done in line with what is expected of them. But then we also know that in case of certain particular sectors, there is a requirement where you need a lot of investment to come in, and tax rate could be something which is a dampener in those cases. So maybe on a sector to sector basis, the government can look at that in line with the modern technology, the changes that are happening, the need of the economy, the tax rate may be reduced for certain sectors, something like solar power, given that government is looking at a lot of electrical vehicles, and that is something which can save us a lot of oil bill. The government may look at some form of exemptions for these businesses. A few amendments which otherwise may also help the corporate sector is that in case of business reorganizations, which is something which is happening due to consolidation, the government may actually look at providing depreciation on goodwill on a more clearer basis. Of course, there's a decision of Supreme Court which says that depreciation on goodwill has to be allowed. But again, there is a dispute on this aspect also on a case-to-case basis with the tax office. That's an amendment that one can look at. So these are some of the amendments which, to my mind, are the immediate ones which one can consider for the purpose of the budget which is coming up tomorrow. Now, which one of them gets considered, which does not, we'll get to know maybe in the next 36 hours. The only thing that we need to be considerate about is how these are going to impact the individuals and the corporates. So let's all eyes be set tomorrow, and we'll come back to you tomorrow to see what actually happens, how it impacts you, and what is it that you need to take care of due to the changes which might be announced tomorrow by the government. Happy budgeting.